Well, welcome everybody. We've fired up the Vitruvian Machine one more time to give you a little bit of a run through of how this installation worked and some of the infrastructure that was involved in bringing all the different pieces together. Now, of course, we don't have Abby Kleinert's Vini Vidi Creavi. We don't have Persicki's Obsolete GPT. We don't have Chris Williams' Horospecs here to enjoy the full sort of experience of the Vitruvian Machine. But what I can show you is a little bit of a run through of Corpus Versum and Versum Spiritus, which is what brought sort of all of these disparate installations together into a unified body, essentially sitting in the theater and acting as our brain for our happening. Now, this all starts with Corpus Versum, and I want you to imagine this. You are sitting at a personal workstation. In this case, it was my full workstation in the center of the theater's stage. Off to either side, you have the whispering coming from the various installations going on out in the hallway outside of the theater space. In front of you, you have video that is being streamed up on the big screens, the back of the stage, of all of the different things, again, happening outside of the theater itself, bringing the outside world into this space that we framed as the brain. And then behind you, watching you perform on the computer, is an audience of cardboard cutout robots. And so you sit down, you look about at the various books and trinkets and whatnot that's at the desk, and then you look to your main screen where you see Corpus Versum. And the first thing you see is to contribute a verse. Now, this verse is meant to be human poetry, poetry that will then be remade and into a machine sort of perversion of the human creation. So I'll give you a sample of how that works so you can see the machine in action. So I click here to enter my ghost token. Let's say it is genre pulp commercial detritus, right? And so once we have that, we're going to go ahead, we're going to sacrifice those words. The machine, you can see, will eat them as it sort of takes it in, moves it over into our body of verse. We then have a GPT Sora generated video of a human eye, quite realistic. You'd probably be hard pressed to know otherwise. This plays then as GPT for all works in the background to create a computer version of the line based on a theme of algorithmic divination and a sort of chaotic mood. This then spits out your new ghost token, right? The sort of inputs that you will put into each of the experiences throughout the Vitruvian Machine, whether that is asking for your oracle from Horospecs or interacting with obsolete GPT or, later working with Kleinert on the giant hand sculpture outside of the event. Likewise, it has generated an image here that it is trying to base on a confluence of the lines that are fed in. So the line that you feed into it, as well as the three previous lines, to sort of get an idea of continuity across that. Those images are generated with stable diffusion. So let me just do a couple more lines here to give you an idea of how all of this comes together. So a million plastic novels might be our next line. I'll go ahead, I'll sacrifice that token. It will take a moment then, of course, as the AI works in the background. You have this, again, this video that you can look at. Meanwhile, outside in the event, we do have all of these images and the lines that accompany them being broadcast and projected against a giant eye that has been pasted against the glass. With a slightly opaque background behind it. So essentially the image goes through this vinyl cutout of an eye, then displays on that sheet that is behind it. So you get yet another layer of looking out and looking in. As the ghost token is being processed then, we'll do just a couple more to get a sort of poem out of this. And as we do this, again, these images are continuing to build on top of each of the lines, right? So there's meant to be a sort of evolving evolution of the imagery as well as the lines. Now, I will say that part of what we were looking at was the absurdity of AI and the fault that it possesses in not being an actual intelligence, right? But being this sort of mimic machine. And you can see that in the Corpus Machina, Machina, where we have the lines that are not very artful, right? These sort of reconstituted lines smack of the sort of falsity you would expect of a machine trying to engage in a human performance, in this case, the act of writing poetry. One second, sacrifice more. So I'm going to go ahead here and I am going to complete this poem. We will fast forward through it here so you don't have to watch me type and watch that image a whole bunch. But let me just take care of that as before we move on, and I'll show you the rest of the system. So then when you get to the end of any given poem that you're working on or that you're collaborating with the other participants within the exhibit on, what you'll do is you'll incarnate the poem. So you click incarnate poem. This will complete the body of verse, essentially binding it together as a single poem. So we're going to go ahead. We will incarnate now. It takes a second as it sort of updates all of the information in the back end. Information which is largely hosted via Google Drives, just because, again, it was a free service and it was easy to use. And then if we were to go ahead and maybe make a new poem, what would happen is this theme would actually change for us. So each poem gets a different theme and a different mood for the way that the machine remakes it. Now, while this is going on, this is your main screen, but you do also have two other screens that are stacked off to the side there. Now, these screens are displaying, first of all, the slideshow of all of the poems and the images that have already been written/generated. These, again, are the ones that are being projected out into the lobby outside the theater against that vinyl eye, so that we are not just bringing the outside in, but we are also then acting in the world and we're projecting the inside out. These pictures are simultaneously being sent to a printer that is set up near Kleinert's station for the Vini Vidi Creavi, and these pictures being printed out are then able to be cut up and pasted to that sculpture of the giant hand. This particular display is able to be sort of changed up depending on if you want it to be single image, tiles, if you want it to be stretched across. I prefer tiles. I think it looks nice. It fills up that entire space. And then it also has some different transitions that I've built in, my favorite being the glitch. You can also change the duration. You can randomize the slides. The poems don't appear in order then, but you have some options that you can use. And then there are some further menu options there, or that pulls up those menu options in case you don't have the hover that I'm using here. Again, projected outside, printed outside, and becoming part of the installation as human feedback becomes mechanic interpretation, machine interpretation, which then becomes, again, human art as it is being used in all these different ways. Now, this is not the end of the sort of process for the building of this poem. I always tell my students that a poem doesn't really gain its life until we give it our breath. And in that sort of spirit, there is Versum Spiritus. So while these poems are being created and these images are being generated, once we incarnate that poem, it is sent to this list of poems over as part of Versum Spiritus, the spirit of verse. So we're going to go down and we're going to click on let's just try, well, let me go ahead actually and reset it so that we have our new poem in there. It updates on a regular basis. You'll also be able to hear, so as we move into Spiritus, Versum Spiritus, you can also hear the sort of chatter, this whispering that is going on in the background. Now, this is not maybe something that you necessarily want to hear, especially when you're programming. Let me tell you, this sort of chatter drove me nuts as I was trying to squash bugs and troubleshoot the machine. So I did build in a hotkey that we can go Alt-W, it quiets the whispers, which is, of course, fantastic. I would also say that in the process of building this, we were originally going to use some AI-generated songs that we had curated. I curated a bunch of them, I built them in there, and built a playlist. So the original version was actually just going to work through this playlist of AI-generated songs, but we decided that we didn't want all of that extra noise brought out into the lobby where people were trying to converse with obsolete GPT or to try and foretell the omens through Chris Williams' installation. So that was not ultimately used. I just hid it behind a quick hotkey, and that allowed that flexibility if we did want to at a later date use that function, we could. So in order for us to give our poems voice, what I did with Versum Spiritus is it imports all of the poems that you have been working on. So in this case, or they come through then as untitled poems because we need to sort of name that spirit, and this is where the breath idea comes in. So I've just pulled up untitled YVMWSN, right? Just kind of give it a random series of characters. This is the poem that we've just written together. So I will then give it a name by clicking this button. I'll hold that and I will speak the name. Fresh Kills Landfill. It fills in. I now have to decide who do I want to read this name using just sort of Google's standard text-to-speech voices. I would say that I've found the UK English female to be quite pleasing, but we can change the speed, we can change the pitch, and we can test them out as we go to determine if we have the voice that we actually want. So let me just give you a sample of that, because what I've done here is I have a list of quotes from some famous creatives about the act of creation, the art of making, in all sorts of various ways, and that's what we test the voice on. So let's just give that one or two test runs.
If you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. Ken Robinson.
So let's say, okay, that's all right. Let's say we want a slightly higher pitch, maybe a slightly slower speed on that voice. We'll go ahead, we'll test it again.
Every artist joins a conversation that's been going on for generations, even millennia, before he or she joins the scene. John Barth.
So we have Barth there. Let's go ahead. I'm going to put that pitch back to 1. I think I like that better. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to generate some musical accompaniment to go with this human-generated poem that will be read by a synthetic voice. So let's generate that. As we're generating that, you see this record, this broken record pops up. This was also a video generated through Sora, so OpenAI's video generation model. And this will spin while essentially 10 seconds of music is being created from MusicGen, which is a Facebook open source music generation model. I only chose to do 10 seconds of a song and then just put it on repeat if it happened to be a longer poem, for the fact that it takes an extraordinary amount of time to generate even those 10 seconds of music, and trying to be conscious of the user themselves and the experience that they have when they are working the machine. Now, if I could make it happen even faster, absolutely would, but it looks like our record should be starting to slow down in terms of its spinning, so that we will be able to hear what this rendition of the poem sounds like. I'm going to turn our whispers back on in the meantime. So we're whispering, you've got all that input coming from the video, from the audio recordings being piped in. And here we go.
Here's a piece called Landfill Fresh Kills. Genre, pulp, commercial detritus. A million plastic novels and screen-printed poems litter the landfills of New York as self-fashioned crows, pretentious, snobbish bores tear covers from spines and call in delight at the snapping of ligament and bone. So learn to scavenge among the rubble, corpses and cows of purple crows. Laugh at yourself and devour your own.
So the AI voice clears their throat. They have a selection of phrases introducing the poem by its new title, a title that was again actually transformed between the speaking and the interpretation. And then at the end, the music fades out. We have our virtual audience of robots standing behind us that will, sort of give a small round of applause. One of the things I wanted to build in was a way to change the balance between the volume of the music and the playback or the reciting of the poem. But as with all things, time is limited in terms of what you can get done. So that's where I got to with that. And this is the system then of Corpus Versum, Versum Spiritus, and then our image display, and a short explanation of how it all came together to fit within the larger Vitruvian machine, the sort of exploration of human creativity as it intersects with machine capabilities. So I hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions about the creation of Corpus Versum or the event itself of the Vitruvian machine or things that we're getting up to afterwards, I'm happy to field those. Just reach out and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.